welcome back to my video blogs. Today I thought I would talk about a chronic problem that many people suffer with around the world that unfortunately is often misunderstood and or poorly treated in therapeutic settings. That is plantar fasciitis. What I'm going to do is give you a little orientation as to what plantar fasciitis is, how it happens, some considerations you have to make, and then I'm going to share some techniques for managing the condition in the healing process, which are extremely important. And if these techniques are not used, chances are that it will take a very long time to get over plantar fascia problems, if ever. So first of all, let's look at what the plantar fascia is. The plantar fascia is a web of connective tissue that's an extension of the Achilles tendon. So if you see the Achilles tendon here, the plantar fascia, the Achilles tendon and the connective tissue fibers continue around the calcaneus. So the Achilles tendon comes down to the calcaneus, but the tendon, if you look at an anatomy dissection or do an anatomy dissection, the fibers of the tendon continue right around the calcaneus and actually become the plantar fascia. In other words, there's no break between that tendon and the plantar fascia, or the connective tissue that supports the arch of the foot. Now they've cut the plantar fascia out on the diagram so you can see the muscles of the foot, but there you can see the beginnings of the plantar fascia, which normally comes all the way across the foot and merges into the metatarsals up here, where you can see the plantar fascia still in the diagram. So the plantar fascia then creates a web support system, a suspension system, so that when the foot strikes the ground during normal gait, we strike the ground with the lateral edge of the foot and we pronate to distribute the shock of the ground reaction forces across the bones of the foot. The plantar fascia acts kind of like a hammock, so that as the foot is loaded, it gives you some suspension under there. And the plantar fascia, like all these big sheets of connective tissue, is part of the body's energy storage and return system. So all these big sheets of connective tissue that you see here and these long tendons act like springs that absorb energy when your foot strikes the ground. And as you're propelling yourself up against gravity, the energy from all these connective tissues is released back to you, lifting you up. Many of you would be familiar with this without realizing it. Certainly you've had the experience of running in sand and finding it's much harder to run in sand than it is to run even on a dirt trail. The reason being is when the foot strikes the sand, it falls into the sand, and the energy that normally bounces back through the system and is stored by the connective tissue in the body is lost into the sand, whereas on harder ground, it causes a return investment of energy. So you can see by that token then, just like soft sand will absorb the energy, if you're running on or working or standing on hard surface like concrete all day, you can not only get sore feet and a sore body because there's just not enough give in the surface that you're standing on, but standing for long periods of time in shoes that are inadequately supportive can lead to chronic stress on the plantar fascia. Now, in a healthy, balanced body, that's usually not much of a problem. But if a person already has overpronation issues and they stand for long periods of time, that will put chronic stress on the plantar fascia, and the pain usually emerges right where the plantar fascia reconnects into the calcaneus, or the heel bone, right where you see that red line. So people that have plantar fascia problems often have pain right here in the heel region where the plantar fascia merges in. So there's a variety of therapeutic procedures that we can do, and I'll cover those in a minute. But before we get into that, I want to make a key point in that plantar fascia is rarely actually the problem in and of itself. It's extremely rare. The plantar fascia, like most musculoskeletal problems, is the symptom of a lack of structural support, both statically, standing in a field of gravity, and dynamically, running, jumping, walking, and moving. So there's a couple of key points I'll make. One, we have a deep longitudinal system of muscles, a muscle chain behind the body that starts at the occiput on one side, and here you see the paraspinal muscles and the connective tissue on the paraspinal muscles, which becomes continuous with the sacrotuberous ligament. These fibers actually cross over, become continuous with sacrotuberous ligament. Then the biceps femoris, the lateral hamstring, comes down here, as you can see, and down here. It connects into the peroneus longus, and that muscle runs all the way down under and then becomes continuous with the great toe. So what this shows you is that we have a system of muscles that is adjusting the flow of energy and tension and stabilizing the structure statically and dynamically that runs from the base of the skull all the way down to the heel. So down, across, down to the heel, and then into the toes. So your head is connected all the way to your toes through that muscle chain, which is largely responsible for returning the investment of gravitational and kinetic loading to you. With that in mind, we must remember that the organs of the body, as I'll show you in a minute, are connected to all these muscles, and there's many meridians that are involved in as well. So if, for example, somebody's got weak abdominal wall function, in other words, there's poor coordination or inadequate strength, then what happens is the pelvis tends to tip forward. If the pelvis tips forward, it takes the distance between the ischial tuberosity and the knee and makes it longer, stringing those muscles very tight. That tension in the hamstrings continues right here into the calves, because if you look here, you can see the tendons of the hamstrings actually wrap around the gastrocs, the large muscles of the quadricep, or the calves. So when there's tension anywhere in the hamstrings of the paraspinal system, it acts like a clothesline. If you pull on one end, the other end moves. So pulling up here causes tension here, which transfers down through the Achilles into the heel, pulling the heel up, stringing that fascia tight. So if you're tight in the extensor chain on the back of the body, that's already preloaded. So now when your foot strikes the ground, it's as though it's already overloaded because the system's too wound up. If you keep a system wound like that, it reduces blood flow, so oxygen and nutrition can't get in and waste cannot get out effectively. That leads to an accumulation of acidic metabolic waste products in the connective tissues, which actually can start eroding the connective tissues and lead to an inflammatory process. A simple way to think about this is think of what happens if you've ever spilled battery acid on clothing. It eats through the clothing. So when you get too much metabolic waste in tissue, it starts to erode the tissue and weaken the tissue, which can lead to chronic plantar fascia problems or connective tissue problems. So with that little intro, we're going to now move over here, and I'm going to make another couple of points for you. One, in this very, very powerful, hard to get a hold of, and probably very expensive book, The Abdominal and Pelvic Brain with Autonomic Visceral Ganglia by Byron Robinson, MD, which was probably the first and most comprehensive, and still the most comprehensive book in the world. It was written in 1907 by a very, very knowledgeable medical doctor who did extensive dissection, was a surgeon, and did a tremendous amount of investigation into how the body functions. And one of the key things Byron Robinson, MD, showed is that due to the orientation of the autonomic nervous system and the sympathetic system's control of blood flow in the body, along your spine, you have ganglia. And these ganglia that run along the spine, you can't see them here, but they run from nerve fiber to nerve root to nerve root. They control the flow of blood in and out of the organs. And what Robinson showed us very clearly in here, which I found to be very true from a clinical perspective, is that whenever an organ needs blood, oxygen, nutrition, or waste removal, to the degree that that organ must compete with any of the muscles on the same channel. So if you look here, all these nerve roots not only feed the organs in front, but they feed the muscles as well. The organs do not have their own sensory nerve endings. They borrow their sensory nerve endings from the musculoskeletal system. That's why, for example, when someone's having a heart attack, they don't say, I have pain in my heart. They say, I have pain in my chest and my left arm, because the heart's on the left side, and it gets its pain sensory fibers from the same nerves that feed your chest and left arm. So organ pain is typically felt in the muscles, joints, and tissues that are on the same neurological channels. In my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, on page 121, I show you a diagram I created giving you the spinal innervation for each of the common organs. Once you know where your problem's at, for example, if you have a plantar fascia problem, you're dealing largely with the kidney, prostate, testicle, ovary, uterus, and bladder. Those ones are going to be the first organs that are going to be competing with the muscles in the legs, for example. So if there's problems in those organs, blood supply will be reserved. No matter how hard you exercise the muscles of your legs and feet, they will not be able to get adequate blood supply to provide the oxygen, nutrition, and waste removal, because they're in competition with organs. If you lose your foot, you can still live, but if you lose an organ, you got big, big problems. So I also show many tests in this book for assessing core function. This is called Getting to the Core, Chapter 7, so that you can identify whether or not your muscles are working. So here you can see the orientation of the organs, and as a general rule of thumb, if you just take your hand and put it on any organ and go right around back to the spine, you can pretty much guesstimate where those nerves are coming from. All the organs from the belly button down have significant effect on the leg muscles. If we look here at the meridian system, you can see we have several meridians running right down into the arch of the foot and through the muscles, both in the front and the back, that control all the muscles and are related to the muscles that have a direct influence on the support of your arch, such as the kidney, the bladder, the spleen, and the stomach. Now, many people have deficiencies in the kidney region due to adrenal fatigue, which is extremely common. So if you look over at my chart on the wall over here, your kidneys sit right here. So if you have kidney problems from eating foods that you're intolerant to, or your adrenal glands are exhausted, or any other source of problem, such as medical drugs that you can't clear, etc., because the kidneys are here, they share a common innervation with the hip flexors, which are key stabilizers of your spine, and the hip flexors are the bridge between the spine and the lower, or between the spine and the leg. So just like the latissimus dorsi muscles are the bridge between the spine and the shoulder, connecting the shoulder and the spine, the psoas muscles link the lumbar spine and the legs, and they work functionally to control the position of the pelvis statically and dynamically. So many exercises, things like running, jumping, you get people doing things like CrossFit, where there's a tremendous amount of physical stress on the body in a very short period of time. Once these muscles start drawing more energy off the channel than the kidneys will allow, they will reduce blood supply to these muscles. If you keep exercising a muscle when it's lacking blood, it can cause problems in the muscle. It can set it up with trigger points, metabolic waste. It can lead to all sorts of imbalances in the system because the muscle cannot keep up with its functional synergists. That divides the body in half. Once your hip flexors are no longer balanced with your extensors, now your pelvis cannot be stable, and the pelvis tends to wander forward. The tail may tuck under, or it could go into a hyperlordosis depending on a number of other factors, all of which put excessive stress on the plantar fascia system. So we must remember then that we have organ issues, we have meridian issues, we have diet and lifestyle issues, we have postural issues, and then we have to also look at some of the other control functions. As I shared in my blog on shoe fitting, at the top of the totem pole we have the psyche, or the mind. Then we have respiration, mastication, vision, the vestibular system and hearing, the upper cervical spine, the organs, the emotions, and finally the pelvic girdle, particularly the sacrum, because of its intimate relationship with the central nervous system. And then down below we have the slave joints, which includes the joints of the foot and the ankle. So what that means is that all these systems have to be assessed to determine which of them are potentially contributing to the malfunction we're calling plantar fascia. Otherwise, you're always going to be treating the symptoms and never identifying the causes. That said, now that we've had a little kind of grand tour, we also want to remember that if you see this foot here, you have organ reflexes from your entire digestive system and visceral system all through the foot, any of which can cause problems in the plantar fascia due to reflex changes in tissue tension, energetic flow, and therefore the flow of nutrition, waste, etc. through the foot. So it's a pretty comprehensive system, and most people treat the plantar fascia as though it's the problem, which is rarely the case. Now, many people get plantar fascia on one foot. If you get plantar fasciitis on one foot, unless you're using one foot, most people walk on two legs and skip rope on two legs and things like that. If you get plantar fascia on one foot, one of the common problems that can lead to that, one is a true leg length discrepancy, a leg shorter than the other, or an induced leg length discrepancy. The most commonly subluxed vertebra in the human spine, sublux meaning falling out of place, is the atlas. It's got the most range of motion of all vertebrae, and it's the most common to come out of position. The atlas is what interfaces your head with your body, and it's responsible for maintaining your eyes, your ears, and your teeth in a horizontal plane, which orients you to your environment. If that atlas rotates for any reason, it causes the head to tip to the side and shift, and then so if the atlas turns left and in your side bent left, the body has to shift the pelvis to the right and lean the trunk to the right. That puts a tremendous increase in the weight on my left foot. So if I'm running, jumping, walking all day, standing on my feet, I'm going to have an asymmetrical load on my legs. One foot's going to be more pronated than the other, more loaded than the other, so you're going to get this torsion pattern in the body. So typically you see a torsion pattern or a twist pattern in plantar fascia problems, particularly when you have one-sided plantar fascia. If you have a bilateral plantar fascia, it usually relates to a combination of what I've said here, but also can be due to overtraining. Now, I've treated more cases of plantar fasciitis in my life than I could possibly count. And when I used to train the United States Army boxing team, that was a big problem amongst boxers, because boxers skip rope for long periods of time on the floors. And sometimes they're on concrete, sometimes they're on wood. I've seen a lot of this in jumping athletes. So what happens is, if you keep impacting and breaking the tissue down faster than the body can repair it, well, then naturally you're going to end up with problems. Another big thing is that a lot of people do not wear shoes that are good for or adequately supportive of, or maybe too supportive of their feet. If you have a poor conditioned foot and you don't have good structure in your foot, and you wear shoes that are too unsupportive, you can collapse into yourself and stretch that plantar fascia and traumatize it. If you have shoes that are too rigid, they do not allow normal mechanics of the foot, that can also cause plantar fascia problems. So everything I said in my video about sizing your shoes and choosing the right shoes is very relevant to the issue of plantar fasciitis. So those things said, there's a few things that you can do that can go a long way. First of all, you've got to have someone like a skilled CHEK practitioner or HLC practitioner at the level HLC 3 that knows how to check all these things. But what you need to do in the healing process, aside from the things I show in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, with identifying any diet and lifestyle factors that might be involved, core dysfunction that may be involved, stretches that might be needed to be done, etc., we need to give the plantar fascia system some support in order for it to heal, or it just won't heal. So a technique I've been using for many, many years that I learned studying sports medicine 25 or 30 years ago, and it's been very successful for me, is that if you go out and buy yourself a pair of just cheap flip-flops, your typical Safeway drugstore flip-flops, then what you're going to do is you're going to cut the heel off of one pair. Make sure you cut the heel off on the opposite side of your plantar fascia problem. So if your plantar fascia is on the left, cut the right heel off. Then you're going to take it and you're going to put that wedge, that heel that you've cut off, you're going to slide that onto your sandal, and you're going to want to take a piece of tape or some tape. You're going to mount that on there so it doesn't slide off, and you're going to want to use some good strong tape. I'm just doing this real quick just to show you what it looks like. So you'll tape that on there. Okay, so now what happens, once you have that on there and you put your foot into the sandal, what it does is it lifts the heel up, and that allows the forefoot to drop, shortening the distance between the metatarsal and the calcaneus, which allows the plantar fascia to not have so much tension on it. So what you do is you need to, the most important time to have that sandal on is first thing when you get out of bed. At night, the tissue heals, so your body lays new tissue down where the plantar fascia is injured, but that new tissue is very, very easy to traumatize or tear, particularly at night if you get up to go to the bathroom and first thing in the morning. You want to protect that tissue because that is the growth and development that is part of the healing process. But what happens is people don't know this, so they get up and they have this sharp pain in their foot very frequently when they get up from sitting down after several hours or laying in bed. That pain is the new tissue tearing. Eventually that starts turning into scar tissue, and it can lead to quite a knot, quite a bump under the heel that can be very painful to walk on, and that's a big ball of scar tissue that needs to be broken up. So we need to not only protect that new tissue, but we actually need to do some other things. You can take 2 tennis balls and just put a strip of tape around them. Like so. Okay, then you take another wrap of tape. Now I'm just doing this real quick. You could do it a little thicker and stronger if you want. You want to put this on quite tight. These need to be held together quite tightly. Like so. Okay, so then what you're going to need to do with these, you're going to want to massage the bottoms of your feet on these regularly, at least a couple of times a day. The most important time is before you put your sandals on. So you just stick that on the floor next to your sandal, and you just put your foot on there, and you massage your foot, and you get right up into that plantar fascia, and you roll that out. Now, the plantar fascia runs this way, so when you feel down where that plantar fascia pain is, there's usually going to be a painful spot right here. You want to go across that with transverse friction, across this way. It runs that way, so transverse is that way. Find the most painful spot and begin to friction that, and give yourself as much pain as you can handle therapeutically, and begin to break that scar tissue down. You don't want to be so invasive that it, is painful when you finish, but usually when you start frictioning it, it hurts. After about 2 to 3 minutes, the pain goes away. You want to continue till the pain starts to return again and you feel heat where you've been frictioning, but don't go too far and cause swelling. So you start frictioning, It hurts a little, keep frictioning till the pain goes away, and soon it starts to become just a little irritated. That's when you stop. Then you want to take a chunk of ice and massage that till it goes numb. Now, you don't have to do the ice massage in the middle of the night, but that's part of your daily practice, is to massage that foot, friction that, and ice it at least once a day. Then when you get out of bed, you got to have your sandals on, and I recommend wearing your protective sandals around. Now, if you find the sandals very helpful, if you're wearing them for any length of time, you're going to need to go get another couple of pairs of sandals and reproduce the same thing for the other foot just to keep your pelvis level, because if you only have one of these on, it'll twist your pelvis. So if you need it for more than just getting to the toilet and back in the morning, it's a good idea to make two just to bring the pelvis level. So those are some of the most important things I wanted to share with you about plantar fascia problems. It is a comprehensive issue, as I've just described. You can recover from it fairly quickly if you make the necessary diet and lifestyle modifications. For example, people eating too much omega-6 fatty acids will often have a high level of inflammation in their body, and if you have too much inflammation in the body, wherever you're weakest starts to break down. So getting your diet right, getting enough sleep, looking at the issues that I've shared, managing it properly, supporting it properly, and pay close attention to the activities that you've been doing. So if, for example, if you're skipping rope on hard surfaces, you need to get on some mats or on something that's more forgiving. If you're wearing shoes that are not supportive and you're standing in a warehouse all day, well, then you need to get better shoes and get your body in better shape so that you can handle these things, or this type of injury can just plague you forever and lead to all sorts of problems. And if you leave it too long, then your body begins to compensate. You don't walk normally anymore because of the pain, so you start favoring one side, and that can cause torsion to go from the bottom of the body up to the head and trigger an atlas subluxation as a part of a compensation from the bottom up. So the moral of this story is you don't want to fart around with this stuff. When you got pain in your body, it's an indication that there's something that's out of balance, and it's a wise thing to take action, because the longer you leave these imbalances in place, the more they spread throughout the body, the more the nervous system learns to move incorrectly, and the harder it is for a therapist like me to help you heal. Hope you enjoyed my little lesson on plantar fasciitis today. I will see you again as soon as I can get back and share something else with you. Thanks for joining me. I'm Paul C.H.E.K.